Greetings to each one of you in Jesus' name as we gather again this Lord's Day morning. If you recall, 2 weeks ago I said that I would probably, that 2 weeks ago was our communion service and we didn't have Sunday school, and I said I would endeavor to bring the message from the Sunday school text, and so I intend to do that. I was too late in the game thinking about it to, was almost completely done preparing, and I prepared from the message side of it, preaching it. That's what I do most and I'm used to. And I thought, well, maybe I should have prepared this as more of an auditorium Sunday school type setting, and stood down there and required more participation from you, and but I am also aware of the fact that that would have almost required 2 lessons for you to study and be prepared to dialogue in on a Sunday morning, and so I didn't. In a sense, I felt like, yes, I need to let Sunday school be Sunday school, and so we will endeavor to look at the power of the tongue from Proverbs 15 and from Proverbs 26. I am not sharing from a position of strength. I think that's important for all of us to remember, whether you're a Sunday school teacher, whether you're a parent, whatever role you're filling in. There are times, and preachers in particular must remember this, but all of us through life need to remember we don't always get to share, to look at lessons, whatever they may be, from a position of strength, from where we've got it together, and then we get to teach it. In fact, sometimes I wonder if God in his all-knowing providence don't kind of work things the other way. Because what do we always say? The vast majority of people say, when I teach, I get more out of it. So maybe God knows what he's doing. He aligns it so that the lesson is not to our strength, but to our weakness, because he knows you need it, buddy. You're the guy that needs to practice what you preach. You need to grow. And so I think it's important for all of us to remember when we teach, when we preach, so on and so forth, that the real key as to whether we got it is not our mental assent to it, but how it affects our lives and how we then live afterward. The memory selection is from Proverbs 18:21. It says, "Death and life are in the power of the tongue, and they that love it shall eat the fruit thereof." Boy, you could ponder on that for a while, couldn't you? And all the implications there. Death and life are the 2 great extremes in human existence, and the tongue has the ability to take us to either extreme. That verse is indicating. It says, death and life are in the power of the tongue. I am going to give 3 names from American history, and I realize some of these could be a little tricky because some of them may have said very significant things, but they kind of breathed life into a thought or a movement. And you tell me what they may be. I'm testing your American history a little bit, not that that really matters in the big scheme of things. There was a man, there I gave you a clue already. This is a man. Give me liberty or give me death. Who said that, and what movement did they breathe life into? That is often credited with a very important statement in early American history. Who said it, and what did they breathe life into? Patrick Henry, very good. I would have not got this. What's that? 4th of July. He breathed life into the idea of the revolution, the American Revolution. Now, we often glamorize that in American history, but as conservative, Anabaptist, non-resistant Christians, how much should that be a resounding theme with us? We need to think about that a little. I'm not here passing judgment on Patrick Henry, but he's often credited with the one that spoke, put words behind the spirit that was moving among the colonial people with that. I'm illustrating, trying to, the words giving life to something, giving life or death. These basically are all giving life to something. We're not saying that they're spiritual. I'm not making a spiritual connection necessarily. The next person said, all men are created equal, as part of, I think it was a 6 or 8 minute address. Who said that? One of the interesting things is that address was a very subordinate. He was not the headliner that day. The other person gave a 2-hour address and nobody remembers who they were. And this goes down in American history as one of the great speeches of all times. And it was very good. Abraham Lincoln. What address was it? Gettysburg Address. After the war had been fought there, and they were kind of back to Gettysburg at the site of that battle, not right then, but what did he breathe life into? Now, he kind of took something from the Constitution that America was saying, but they weren't doing. They were saying all men are created equal in the Constitution, back from Patrick Henry's day. But this was the 1860s, and he was reminding of that. And what was the implication? Slavery wasn't right. Yeah, slavery didn't line up with our ideals of a constitution. So he was breathing life into the idea that all men are created equal and that slavery is not treating everybody equally. Third one probably is the easiest one, and it's because it's a lot closer to our day. I have a dream.
Martin Luther King.
Yeah, Martin Luther King. What was he breathing life into? This is more, and I didn't study these deeply. This is my idea of the whole idea of the equality of all people. He sees all people as equal. And he was breathing life into that ideal. We probably aren't there yet, but there is, I think, whether you agree with Martin Luther King or not, there was a pretty significant truth in that Christians should get a hold of. It goes back to our Sunday night service just last Sunday night. The equality of all people, at least to a point. These speeches and excerpts, some American history, show how the tongue can help breathe life into something. But the tongue has the equal power to bring hurt and death into lives. And I thought about coming up with some illustrations of that, and I thought I'm not going to go into the negative side. And I may say this now just because I said it. It was interesting to me to look. I believe this text was 16 verses long, right around there. 4 of them are on the positive, 12 of them on the negative in relation to the tongue. Why is that? I was contemplating that. You know, we like positive messages resound with us, right? I wonder if it's not in proportion to how it really works out. I'm not saying that is, But I'm guessing it might be, yeah, maybe about a quarter of the words are uplifting and building and breathe life. And if you take across all of humanity, 75% of the words are sort of the other way. Bring death and hurt and loss into the picture. I don't know. Take that for whatever it's worth. Our introduction and focus there, and maybe for time I won't read the full introduction if you have your quarterly in front of you. But it talks about the ability to withhold angry words, but that doesn't necessarily mean that our heart is full of genuine love and goodwill, and I think that's important to consider. It does talk about, from John, and maybe I'll read that there from James 3:17. This is why we need the wisdom that is from above, which is pure, then peaceable, gentle, easy to be entreated, full of mercy and good fruits, without partiality and without hypocrisy. Do we allow Christ to control our tongues and our actions? And I think that's something for each one of us to consider and ponder. And if we're not, when we fail, I think it's fair probably. I'm not passing judgment on any one of you personally, but from what I know about humans is that none of us got this all figured out. And so when we fail, to acknowledge it, to work at understanding it is not a failure of the tongue as much as we like to think it is. And I might think about that just a little bit more later. James, the latter part of chapter 1 and James chapter 3, if I would have been totally on my own, I'd have probably chose them for the text and used these Proverbs as background. But we do need to, I'm not slighting the Sunday school committee for their selection here. I am just saying that I think that brings a New Testament perspective that we live in the reality of that Proverbs don't. I think it is very good to remember with all of Scripture that different books and different sections of Scripture are written from different positions, kind of. And Proverbs is a position of the general, looking at the big picture. You probably don't want to make a lot of close, detailed doctrine on Proverbs. All Scripture is not intended for the same purpose. And I think it's always good, not necessarily with this subject only, but with a lot of subjects, to remember that. Again, back to the statement I made, something I said earlier, this lesson is not as much about the tongue, in my opinion, as it is about the power behind it or the control of it. That's really at the deep underlying. The power of the tongue is in the title, but I think the power is of more significance maybe than the tongue. We need to consider the power, the energy, what makes it live and move. Okay, let's move on to the text. Proverbs 15, 1 through 4. That would be the first section, the tongue of the wise. A soft answer turneth away wrath, but grievous words stir up anger. The tongue of the wise useth knowledge aright, but the mouth of fools poureth out foolishness. The eyes of the Lord are in every place, beholding the evil and the good. A wholesome tongue is a tree of life, but perverseness therein is a breach in the spirit. A principle all of us do well to remember is that principle there in verse 1 of chapter 15. A soft answer turneth away wrath. And maybe I'm going to go to two illustrative stories from the book of Judges. I just want you to think about the one Gideon here in chapter 8, how he used his tongue, and then I'm not sure who it is we're going to look at in chapter 12. We'll get there when we get there. Chapter 8, verses 1 through 3. Thinking about the principle of a soft answer turneth away wrath. And the men of Ephraim said unto him, that was Gideon, Why hast thou served us thus? And thou called us not when thou wentest to fight the Midianites. And they did chide with him sharply. And he said unto them, What have I done now in comparison to you? Is not the gleanings of the grapes of Ephraim better than the vintage of Ebenezer? God hath delivered into your hands the princes of Midian, Oreb, and Zeb. And what was I able to do in comparison of you? When then their anger was abated toward him when he had said that. Now, I don't think he, and we're going to talk a little bit later about flattery, but I don't think he was using flattery here. He just chose to focus on what they did and what they accomplished in his soft answer. Was Gideon wrong for what he did? I don't think probably he was without a lot more study than I've done on that. But he turned it around. He talked about the good grapes they had there and the things they did to help the Israeli tribes. And he talked good to them. And you know, their chiding sharply went away pretty quick. Soft answer turneth away wrath. Now let's go to chapter 12, and we'll see the opposite. Judges 12, verses 1 through 4. And the men of Ephraim gathered themselves together and went northward and said unto Japheth, Wherefore passest thou not over to fight against the children of Ammon, and didst not call us to go with thee? We will burn thine house upon thee with fire. And Japheth said unto them, I and my people were at great strife with the children of Ammon, and when I called you, ye delivered me not out of their hands. And when I saw that ye delivered me not, I put my life in my hands, and I passed over against the children of Ammon. And the Lord delivered them into my hand. Wherefore then are ye come up unto me this day to fight against me? And Japheth gathered together all the men of Gilead and fought with Ephraim. And the men of Gilead smote Ephraim, because they said, Ye Gileadites are fugitives of Ephraim from Ephraimites and from among Manassanites. What happened there is they went after him and said, you didn't ask us to come help. And they didn't have a soft answer. And they said, basically, we're going to burn you in your house. That's my paraphrase. I have in my notes here, soft answer equals peace. Sharp words equal anger or war. I think it's always good. Do we remember that? Did your family remember that this morning when you were getting ready for church? Are we going to remember it tomorrow morning when it's time to do the daily things of life? Soft answer equals peace. Sharp words, we're going to have conflict. It's going to be war at some level. That's a general principle. That's how it works. And I think we do well to remember that as we journey through life. Now, let me ask you a question for you to consider personally. When you use sharp words, who is your focus on usually? When you use sharp words, who do you focus on? Where is your focus? Now, when you use soft words, who's your focus on? I think it's pretty clear, isn't it? See a few heads nodding. I think we do well. That's a principle that can help guide us as we journey through life. Sharp words? Better check who's on the throne here, what's going on, who I'm looking out for. Soft words. If I want to think of others, I will use soft words, generally speaking. Also, along with this side of it, is I think maybe I talked about this before, or used this illustratively before. It is not only what we say, but it's how we say it. I heard this illustrated years ago. A man said it like this when he was illustrating it. He said, I said to my dog, "You're such a bad dog, and I'm going to kill you." And the dog wagged his tail and come right up to him. And he said, "I love you." And that dog turned around and ran away. So it's not only what we say, but it's how we say it that carries weight, that tells about how we feel. In your lesson commentary, if you read it on the first section, it says, a soft answer is not referring so much to a quiet answer as a gentle answer. I think there's a lot of principle in there. Soft answer is not so much about a quiet answer as a gentle answer. So we need to be mindful both of what we say and how we say it. Moving on in our text, verse 2 there, the proper use of the tongue. Sometimes we can think, did you ever say something that got you in trouble or, stirred up a big problem? And you say, I am just going to shut up. I'm going to learn to just zip it, say nothing. And maybe if we're really upset, we do that for a day. Is that the answer? Is that what this is teaching? I don't think it is. I don't think it's saying that all our problems can be solved by not speaking. It is saying that what we need to consider what we say often before we say it. I'm going to quickly look at 3 verses. You don't necessarily, you can, but you don't necessarily, I'm not going to spend a lot of time with them. But thinking about the proper use of the tongue here. Psalms 34, verse 13 is the first verse I'm going to look at. Then I'm going to look at one from Proverbs and one from James. Psalms 34, 13. Keep thy tongue from evil and thy lips from speaking guile. And we don't have time to get what is evil and guile, but I think you get the concept there. It's not so much just being quiet, but it's be careful that wrong, sinful, evil things aren't coming out of our mouth. And then Proverbs 21 and 23. Whoso keepeth his mouth and his tongue keepeth his soul from troubles. That's loaded too. And then I'm going to go to James 1 yet, verse 26. James 1:26. If any man among you seem to be religious and bridleth not his tongue, but deceiveth his own heart, this man's religion is vain. Our tongue is one of the gateways. That is, what is in here comes out. And that's true for all of us. And so I think we need to remember that if we want to honor God, what comes out is important. And it is better, if a heart's not right but it doesn't come out here, that's better than having it come out yet. But really we want to work at the heart, because the mouth and the tongue is just the gate. But we want to think about what is residing deep within. Now the fool, in contrast, or the evil person, as I think our text says, lets out of the mouth whatever the heart and mind feel at the moment. Often a lot of feelings come out with the tongue that we don't necessarily want to live out of them. And we may think about that a little more later if we have time. I think I need to keep moving here. I'd like to spend just a little time thinking about descriptive words of wise words. What are descriptive words of wise words? We say, yes, those are wise words. And there is a verse we could look at that is related to each of these, but I don't think I'll have time to look at them. The first one is pleasant words. These words may or may not bring pleasure. It's not necessarily pleasant isn't always pleasure. but generally they are kind, they are healing, they are comfortable. Are my words kind? Are they healing? Are they comfortable? You'll notice honey was talked about there in the text. What is interesting about honey? In Old Testament times, it was considered both, and today yet, most people enjoy the taste of honey. But above that, honey was thought to, and I think maybe there may be some evidences, at least to some level, of it having some medical qualities to it, some healing qualities. Probably why the use of honey, and that was used in Proverbs 16:24, the verse connected to that. Secondly, wise words are appropriate. A wise, kind word is never out of place. Did you ever hear that? Where someone used an appropriate word, and you said, boy, that was, a kind word, a word that brought peace, and you said, boy, that was out of place. That didn't fit. Generally, it doesn't work that way. They're always appropriate. And that verse there would talk about apples of gold and pitchers of silver. Gracious words from Ecclesiastes 10:12 they're decent, they're in order. Did you ever hear the idea, if you don't have something good to say, don't say nothing? But let's generally have something good to say then, right? Let's think about it. Inspiring words from Ecclesiastes 12:11. They will not always be the same for every person. That is true. But they will push another toward a goal or toward a better place. One of the interesting things that me and my wife helped me see is that not all the same words that inspire her aren't necessarily the same words that inspire me. So you have to know your people a little bit. Now, some words are generally, they will inspire everyone. But there's other words, you use some words with some people, and you got to know your people. In other words, you use other kinds of words, because not all of the same concepts inspire people the same way. They don't build them up, they don't push them forward like other words will. But we want our words to be inspiring, to lifting who up? Others, not necessarily ourselves. Moving on, comforting words, Isaiah 50, verse 4. Words that heal, and I talked about that before, words that build up. They often bring peace, even when the events at the moment are anything but. Verses 3 and 4 there in the text, one of the ways maybe that can help us watch our words is remembering God's omnipresent knowledge should help us. God hears it all. God, He knows what comes out of our tongue, out of our mouth. The tongue is a powerful tool. What is very important if you're using a powerful tool? What would all of you want me to consider if I bought a container of dynamite up here this morning, or bought a high-powered gun up here? What would you want me to remember? Be careful with that tool. Think about what you're doing. Know what you're doing. How about with the tongue? It's a powerful tool. Let's know what we're doing. One of the interesting things is to think about in the parenting role. How much time do we spend parenting the use of the tongue? And I could have for sure done better and could. How much does our example lead? I've heard it said of a few people, not too many, but a few people, you've heard them say, either family say, hardly ever heard a sharp word out of their mouth. That's something to consider. Something to consider. What did that maybe tell us about their heart? I noticed in this lesson, as I said earlier, the significantly greater percentage given to the negative things. And I think it's because it's the possibility of being used negatively. And so I'm going to look at that now in the rest of the time here, the next two parts of the lesson here, the tongue of gossip and the tongue of the wicked. So I'll read that second section, Proverbs 26, starting in verse 17. He that passeth by and meddleth with strife belongeth not to him. Belonging not to him is like one that taketh a dog by the ears. As a madman who casteth firebrands, arrows, and death, so is the man that deceiveth his neighbor and saith, Am not I in sport? Where no wood is, there the fire goeth out. So where there is no talebearer, the strife ceaseth. As the coals are to burning coals and wood to fire, so is a contentious man to kindle strife. The words of a talebearer are as wounds, and they go down into the uttermost parts of the belly. The tongue of gossip here, Matthew Henry's commentary, he didn't break the way the lesson's broken down here, but through quite a number of verses, and he broke them into several sections, and the heading he gave them was hatred and strife, and then hatred and strife. And I think it's interesting to think about if you read your lesson, the lesson commentary. What does it talk about the dog, grabbing the dog by the ears there? This is illustrative of why it's really important to understand the context the original writer had. You see, the idea of a family pet would have been pretty foreign to these people in the original text. They didn't have dogs that lived right in with them and a family pet. They were wild scavengers, probably closer to a fox or coyote than what we think of when we think of the family dog. And you grab one of those by the ears, you're going to say it's closer, you're going to probably think it's closer to a suicidal tendency. Maybe that's a little bit of an overstatement, but it would be an event you would not forget in your life for quite a long time. They would see it as a life and death struggle, and they would use all the power within their being to resist you. And that's the context of the written word here. What is that related to? What is it getting at? I think it's talking about getting involved, maybe we say, talking about conflict that doesn't involve us. That's the equivalent there to what it's saying. How often do we do that? How many of you have never done that in your life? Never had a commentary, talked about some conflict that you didn't have, weren't personally involved in? Yeah, we almost always do. In fact, we often have a lot of good understanding of how that conflict should work and who's wrong and who's right and so on and so forth. It's really easy to give our 2 cents to a situation that really is none of our business. Just remember, you're basically grabbing that coyote by the ears and you're shaking at him, looking at him in the face. You're getting him way in over your head. No good reason to be doing this. Moving on, I need to really keep moving. Verse 19 is a subpoint kind of passing off lies and untruths about another. What did you think of there in verse 19? So is a man that deceiveth his neighbor and saith, Am not I in sport? What is there, I am not in sport? What's that really meaning? It was really interesting to me across a whole bunch of different versions. You know what they said there? They said something to this effect, maybe not exactly, but some said this and some said something. I was only joking. That's the translation. I was only joking. Do you ever comment about somebody else's situation and somebody else, it stirs up I was only joking, man. Well, maybe it wasn't a good joke. Maybe a joke that shouldn't have been spoken. If we like to joke, many times it's best to joke about ourselves. I think that's a good thing for me to remember. You want to laugh at somebody? Tell a joke about yourself. The funny thing you did, the stupid thing you did. Not too many people get offended by that. But what profit is there really in talking about other people's, joking specifically about other people's situation? We want to remember that in the use of our tongues. Moving on, verses 20 through 22, the last three verses there, that second section. What's the mood? What's the mood there? Contention, strife, war is a bigger word. Maybe I should quickly go to two New Testament verses here, Philippians 2 and 2 Timothy 2, just to help us think a little bit more what it's saying there in verses 20 through 22. Philippians 2, verse 3. Let nothing be done through strife or vainglory, but in lowliness of mind let each esteem other better than themselves. And 2 Timothy 2, verse 24 will be very similar. And the servant of the Lord must not strive, but be gentle unto all men, apt to teach, patient. The spirit there, the mood I'm suggesting is anti-Christian, anti-follower of Jesus. And according to the text, it fuels and enables what spirit? The spirit of contention, strife. You notice a word there used, it's talebearer. Do you know what another word that is translated that word in the original is translated other places in Scripture as? Instead of a talebearer, it's very similar, a whisperer. It carries the idea of talking about things that are not our business to talk about, and in hushed tones, in quiet places. Did you hear? Did you know? That kind of thing. That's what it's talking about there in verses 20 to 22, according to my understanding. Let's move on to the last section, Proverbs 26, verses 23 through 28. Burning lips and a wicked heart are like a potsherd covered with silver dross. He that hateth dissembleth with his lips, and lieth up deceit within him. When he speaketh fair, believe him not, for there are 7 abominations in his heart. Whose heart is covered by deceit, his wickedness shall be shown before the whole congregation. Whosoever diggeth a pit shall fall therein, and he that rolleth a stone, it will return upon him. A lying tongue hateth those that are afflicted by it, and a flattering mouth worketh ruin. This section of verses focuses on how speaking is often corrupted by a wicked heart. And I think that's important to remember. When we notice that there's things coming out of our mouth that we don't feel good about, check our heart. It's a really good thing to do. Take some time. Maybe you can't do it that minute. Check our heart. What may be happening in here? The idea of burning lips, it's interesting. Bible scholars kind of debate that, and one up front said, that could be taken two ways. It could be meaningful of two things. Burning lips could mean hurtful lips, lips that say hurtful things. It also could have the idea of lying or flattering, burning lips. So neither is acceptable for the follower of Christ. I think we all would agree. Verses 25 and 26, the words of the unbeliever are not trustworthy. And I'm probably going to deviate just a little bit from the focus of the lesson here. And I don't know that that's a good thing generally to do. But I think it's something that concerns me in the age we live in, of Christians needing to be careful of the counsel they receive from unbelievers. especially in what we sometimes call the information age we live into. And the negative idea, how the wicked here, their tongue has, there are things with their tongues that they may, be in giving to us. We need to listen with discernment, being aware of what is being said. In verses 25 and 26. What does it say about the wicked there? If you notice in 25 there, it says, there are 7 abominations in his heart. So if you're listening to an unbeliever, it's really wise, whether it's someone you work with, whether it's a podcast you're listening to, whether it's reading material. Well, and often sometimes we must be aware, many times today in the information we have, we don't know the heart of the person. We can't make a judgment. We don't know anything about their life. And so we are guarded a bit. We don't buy into just somebody can print it on the internet. Doesn't mean it's truth. Doesn't mean it's something substantial to affect our lives with. And that can apply to many areas of life. It can apply in business and finance. It can apply in raising children. It can apply in medical understanding. It can apply in law. I mean, you can go on and on and on in the areas of life that we need to be understanding. There may be abominations in that heart, and we don't want their words, their tongue, to be affecting our heart and moving our heart. I didn't say we can't listen to and learn from unbelievers, but we must listen with discernment, being aware of what is where it's coming from. Verse 28, we notice the lying tongue being talked about, and I think all of us know that that's a problem. Whether by slander or by flattery in particular, we have the ideas here. Who does that, when that comes out of our mouth, who does that identify us with? That's not a trick question. Who does that identify us with? Anybody want to venture a guess? According to John 8:44, who does that identify us with? Satan. Jesus said that in John 8 there, and he said, "You're of your father, the devil." I'll just go there very quickly. Because I think we need to really remember that lying and falsehood are very repulsive in the eyes of God because of the kingdom connection. He was talking to the spiritually blind Jews here. "You're of the father, the devil, the lusts of your father you will do. He was a murderer from the beginning and abode not in the truth, because there is no truth in him. When he speaketh a lie, he speaketh of his own, for he is a liar and the father of it." We want to be very, very, very mindful of falsehood coming out of our mouth. In closing, my closing might be just a smidge longer than often my closings are, but I want to, and I won't take much time, I'll just run through these here. We talked about good words and words that are upbuilding. Now I would like to go to the other side of that. What are evil words? They can be vain. They're descriptive words of evil, what evil words are like. They can be vain. They can be irritating. You ever irritated by somebody's words? Yeah, I think all of us know what that's like. They can be irrelevant. They can be enticing. They can be flattering, very similar. They can be insincere, again, very closely related. They can be proud words. And they can be malicious words, words that bring hurt. Now, how do we know? How are you going to judge your words? How do we know in judging our words where they fit? These good words or bad words? I think the age-old adage is we do well to consider if they'd be coming the other way. Should I say this about someone else? Should I talk about another situation? Should I talk about the business dealings of someone? Whatever it may be. What happens if the roles were reversed? What if they said this about you with the level of knowledge you have about them? If they knew, so often we comment, we get involved, know so little, think we know a lot. How does that feel when it comes the other way? And just try to put ourselves in that place. Often that 9 out of 10 times, that'll tell us if there's good words, bad words. Should I say this? Shouldn't I say this? Just consider it coming the other way, and there's a lot of clarity in that. May we all go forward, not being afraid to use our tongues, because there's much good. There's much that should be said, but let's be mindful that that's what's coming out. Shall we kneel for prayer?